Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. We've got a very exciting guest and a very exciting topic for you tonight. It's one of my favourite topics, which is the power of PR. And I'm here with Kerrin Black. Welcome, Kerrin.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thanks for having me. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Kerrin. So Kerrin is an international publicist and an entrepreneur who helps establish creatives and business owners build their visibility and exposure online through the power of PR. And she's founder of Talent Finders, which is an online talent community that promotes, connects, and educates talent in the creative and entertainment space, which is, of course, also the background that I come from. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. So what we're going to be looking at is both the power of PR to deliver results for your business and brand, and also we'll be looking at creative industries in general and why PR is such a valuable tool for them. So, yeah, great to have you here, Kerrin. Let's just get straight into it, if that's okay.
Wonderful. Sounds great.
Okay. You're a podcaster as well, I should have said as well, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. I've also got my own podcast. So
yeah. Amazing. Okay. So let's kind of smash some of those preconceptions tonight, shall we, about PR? Because we were chatting beforehand, weren't we, about how people just don't really understand the value of PR. They think it's all fluffy, isn't it? It's all about it's all about kind of Instagram and it's just not something that is worth investing in. So let's start from that perspective. And personally, just before we get into it, I just also wanted to say that I actually credit PR with growing the business that I scale from 1 to 6 million in under two years. I credit it all, well, not all of it, but a lot of it, to the power of PR. So I am a big fan, and I just can't wait to really bring this topic to our viewers and listeners too. Okay, so Kerrin, before we get into it, tell us a little bit about you. How did you come to run this exciting business? Why did you choose to focus on creatives specifically? I know they're not your only clients, but why creatives? Why Talent Finders?
Well, thanks, Jane. So it actually all started by default. So I never trained in it. I never went to college or any of those. I mean, I went to Waterfront Theatre School and things, in that creative space, but I never did PR per se. And at the time when I was living in South Africa, I was trying to fundraise for my nonprofit that I have there. And I connected with a South African who was living in New York at the time. And it actually turned out that I ended up doing his PR for him for 4 years. And so that's how my journey in PR started. And again, it was just, putting his story to obviously publications. At that time, social media wasn't, it was there, but, Instagram wasn't there. But it was definitely, it was definitely part of the process. And as I was doing it and going through the process of getting him established in publications like Fast Company, Forbes, some of the bigger names, even though they were in South Africa, still the same brand as US. People just fell in love with the story. And then I realized that it's actually the power of storytelling that really assists and aids in getting PR and getting people into publications, on TV interviews, radio interviews. And so that's actually really how my journey in PR actually started. So, I just started to gain traction, and then I realized, wow, like I can do this. And I think when I look at people talk about the power of storytelling, like I got it way back then. Like I understood that there was something there, and as long as you have something solid, and he was an artist, as in a painter artist, so but I think also that the fact of the matter is, because he was living in the States and he was doing well there, and I was able to bring that story back to his own country of birth because he was South African. Um,
Yeah.
it just kind of snowballed from there. So that's how the journey of my PR started, to give you some context.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but personally, I've spent many, many, many years working with creatives and in creative industries. And in fact, I was a creative myself because I actually started my career as an art director and a set designer. So I've been there as well. And I feel that creative people have a natural affinity with something like storytelling because essentially it is a creative discipline, isn't it? Would you agree? Was that one of the reasons why you felt that you were particularly drawn to working with creatives, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also because I had studied at Waterfront Theatre School and I was in the
Mm.
creative space as well, I think creatives are far more open. They can be also all over the place, creatively and work wise. But I think it's just they're way more open minded, and and it just everything sort of flows. And it was very organic. So I think that was also the thing that was great, because that just felt very natural, and it was like, I was just getting like one publication after another publication, and I was kind of blown away by the process. I mean, obviously times have changed, but I still think that I don't like to say mainstream media, but traditional media is still very powerful, because yes, we're all on devices now, and anybody can tell a story or use Instagram, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself to credibility. Whereas if people are published on articles or in radio interviews, I mean, those people are vetted. Like, it's not, oh, we're
Yeah,
just putting these people on. So to answer your question, yes, I think creatives are more are more open. um, it is also challenging to work with, because they're all over the place, but generally they're more open, so it makes it
yeah,
easier to tell the story.
yeah, yeah. So we touched on one of the benefits of PR then, which we are gonna get into, but really it was the authority angle, wasn't it? The association with those names that are established and trusted and so on. So let's start to look at why you might want to incorporate a PR strategy into your business. So that's obviously one of the reasons, isn't it? It's the authority and actually leveraging established media brands that are trusted rather than it just being you, right?
Yeah,
That's telling the
absolutely.
story about yourself because, we can all make up stories and we can all, that if we're very imaginative, we can make up the greatest of stories about ourselves
Mm.
that can entertain for years, but they might not necessarily be perceived to be trustworthy by our audience. Whereas I think for me anyway, personally, the power of PR is that you've got that third party endorsement. Would you agree?
Yes, 100%. And also you can use, once you featured on the TV interview or the show or the magazine, you can use their logos, which is beneficial for the companies themselves, because they
Yeah.
also get branding. So yeah, I think it's definitely beneficial for sure.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So have you got any particular favorites? I know that probably you're thinking, oh, my connections are gonna be listening to this, and I can't really favor any of them over any others. But are there some, let's just say, some publications that you've specifically placed people in on a fairly regular basis over the years? Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Yes, I mean, f- for sure. For example, Fast Company was one. For sure, loved working with them. In fact, we had Steve Wozniak when he came to South Africa, and got him featured as well, in Fast Company. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's obviously some publications have died or are no longer around. Um, But yeah, I mean, I work also here in the UK with Startup Magazine, which is a fabulous magazine, and they publish a lot of my clients' stories. And again, it's not just, they're very selective as well, and they have specific criteria. Um, but yeah, I mean, Forbes was one as well, where I got quite a few of my clients featured. In their publication. So yeah, I mean, there've been radio. We've had people on, not the political side, but we've had people on Fox Business, for example, which has been very helpful. We've got a client going on to Good Day New York. Um, I've had one of my clients go feature on shows in Los Angeles. So across spectrum, really. I can't really say for sure that there would be one specific, because each of my clients is very different, and they have very different markets and niches. But yeah, I mean, I've established a good relationship with many of these outlets.
So if somebody said, okay, I think that it's about time that I started upping my game in terms of exposure and reach and getting into these publications, or maybe even getting on some shows. Obviously, we were talking beforehand about podcasts, and that's obviously a great way of leveraging other people's audiences and so on. But let's just say, okay, I want to do this, we want to do it, you want to do it, or whatever. Where would somebody start?
Well, where they would start, or especially when I'm working with people that have never worked in, never had PR, don't necessarily understand PR. So for me, I'm very hands-on, and I hold people's hands through the process. I don't just sort of give them over to somebody else. So I normally start with an entry level package, which is a couple of opinion pieces. There are others where it's Q&A questions, and then it gets written out as an article, and then a couple of podcasts. So just to get people used to it, because also it helps the individual to see whether or how they handle themselves on a camera, or because some people go, oh, I want to be on these shows, but then when they're on the show and it's live and it's not a pre-record, like if you're talking Fox Business or Bold TV, or one of these in New York, these are live. So if a person can't conduct themselves, or not conduct themselves, but freeze perhaps on the camera or fumble in their answers, it really doesn't look good. So what I do is, through the podcast and through those things, they then get a feel for how it would be, and then you can always see, okay, if you go on to something bigger, this is how you can improve. So I think that the entry level is always good. And again, it's just about encouraging people to kind of step out of their comfort zone. And it's amazing, some of the articles and things that come out, which help other people in the audience, because it's not necessarily, oh, they're talking about themselves, or it's coming across as narcissistic, because there's plenty of that around. But more like really being able to share nuggets or share aspects. So if they're featuring in different publications, people are seeing a different side of them too. And they're also able to leverage those articles or podcast interviews for their own marketing purposes, and then can obviously progress to more, higher level TV interviews, or publications as
Yeah,
contributors, or whatever it is that we're pitching at the time.
yeah. And I think there's a bit of a myth flying around that people think that basically if you get them in front of a camera, or if you get them onto a podcast or whatever, that they're just going to be able to deliver, and they're going to be able to talk about what they do in a really interesting way. And it is, in my experience anyway, I think about some of the best guests that I've had, and they've been very accomplished speakers, or they've been performers already. And it does take practice, doesn't it?
100%.
Yeah, it's not
Absolutely.
something that is
It's
just.
not always as easy as it looks. I mean, that's
No.
what people fail to. And also, like, if, for example, you're on a bigger show, so if it's an NBC or it's BBC or it's, very often you don't have 10 minutes to talk about something. You may be on for 2-3 minutes, so you really have to be prepared, because that time goes so quickly, and then they're on to the next thing. So it's also about understanding the time limitations people have, and the value of that segment is huge. So there are so many factors.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I personally like to watch politicians being interviewed on things like breakfast TV, because it's interesting to see how they manage to turn the narrative around so that they are really just saying what they want to say, and how that's challenged.
And how they never really answer the question that's asked. They're always
Yeah.
avoiding the actual direct answer.
Yes, exactly, which I personally don't think does them any favors,
No,
because
it
I think
doesn't.
it's just so obvious a ploy.
Yeah.
But it's kind of entertaining when they pick up on that. So how important is it to be a really attentive listener? Let's just say if you are appearing on TV, mainstream TV, for example, do you need to be very responsive and a very good listener and really answer those questions, or can you get away with inserting a bit of your own narrative?
I mean, I think it's important to obviously listen and to answer, but I mean, there are, if I guess sometimes what happens is when something is natural, then and you can sense, okay, I can bring something in, briefly. It is possible, but if you really just want to get the message of what they're asking, and sometimes again, they're not going to preset questions. Some of these are just very, like, you're on and you're being interviewed, and there's no pre-question, so you can't really pre-prepare. They'll say, okay, you're going to be discussing around this topic or this subject, or but you have very limited time, and you just have to. So yes, to answer your question, yes,
Okay.
sometimes you can, but other times you must just be like on the subject.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting the idea that this is not something that you can go from being an unknown to stepping onto the world stage and being the foremost pundit in your sector or niche. It's
Yeah.
a gradual process. I guess that's the message that I'm getting here, step by
Yes.
step.
Yes. And also to your point earlier, just to mention, is that even some people that are very, like, they could be billionaires, I don't want to name drop anybody, but some of them are, like, obviously they're brilliant in their business, but in front of the camera they are awful. And they really can't conduct themselves in an interview like very well. So there's also that element. It doesn't mean because you've made millions that you're going to be good in front of the camera either. So
No.
it's there's a flip to everything.
But you might think if you've made millions that you're really good at everything, because in my experience, most people that have made millions, they generally believe that they have a very, let's say, a robust self-esteem. And sometimes it's a little bit like the emperor's new clothes, isn't it? That you have to
Hmm.
point out, actually, look, they may be really great at doing this specific thing that has led to their success, but there are still some gaps in terms of how they present themselves to the public, to stakeholders, whoever it is that they want to influence.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right. So so we've talked a little bit about the process and about it being fairly gradual and step by step is the best way. Maybe getting some help along the way, possibly getting some training, presentation training, that type of thing. So let's really talk about some of the benefits now. So we've looked at the authority card and how that issue of effectively the third party endorsement from trusted brands, for example, Forbes, Management Today, some of those, obviously there'd be the mainstream press or some of the TV companies, is really powerful. What other benefits are there from building your brand through the power of PR?
Well, I would say personally, how I've seen it for my clients is that it obviously is something that they can use in their marketing and their presentation, and it obviously lends credibility. I also, the other aspect to it is it can be an inspiration to others. So by sharing their story, because really it's the power of storytelling, and it's the
Yeah,
name and the face behind the brand. So
yeah,
people, if their companies are good, the product or the brand or the service speaks for itself. But but it's so much more than that, and people really want to know the name and the face behind the brand. So I think that is because there's that human element, right? And
yeah.
yeah, so
No,
I think
I
that,
agree. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm totally with you on that, Kerrin, because I think much more today than ever before, people want to buy from people. And in the past, they probably wanted to as well, but they didn't have that luxury. But with online transparency just being, I mean, it's just increasing all the time. People really want to know, well, who is this person? If I'm going to be spending money, if I'm going to be investing in some service or some business or whatever, then who am I actually giving my money to? I think it's quite an
Mm,
important issue, isn't it? Because good people don't want to be giving their money to bad people, right? If
no.
you're an ethical person, then you want to know that the person or the business that you're investing in shares your values. And of course, as you said, that is the power of storytelling and PR, in that you can make your mind up for yourself without any additional filters being in the way. And that's the thing that I really love about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like you say, people buy people, and that is so true, because at the end of the day, without the name and the face or the person behind that, obviously, it doesn't really, nothing else really matters. So I think it's also the experience people go through, um, with those people, but also the experiences that those entrepreneurs went through to share their stories, which also helps other entrepreneurs or other people starting businesses
Mm,
in whatever sector. And there's lessons and nuggets that people can take from their stories. So I think it's got multiple benefits.
mm. So in terms of the actual channels available, obviously there's television, we've talked about that. So mainstream television, which I'm sure is one of the most powerful mediums because of the reach, really, and the viewers.
Yes.
So there's that. Then there's podcasting, obviously, like we're doing now, and we were talking about podcasting before the show. And so I'd like to talk about guesting on podcasts, hosting podcasts. Where is the most value to be found in podcasts? And then, of course, there's the magazines. So we were talking about, we've mentioned quite a few names since we've been here. So what other channels would there be, and which is your favorite, or do you just think it's good to have a combination of everything if you were to put together a strategy?
Well, I think radio as well. Radio is very powerful. It still has big
Oh,
listenership for sure. So I definitely would suggest radio as well. Um, so for me, I think podcasts are powerful. And like I said to you before we started the interview, was I know that a lot of people have this ambition, like they want to be on like Joe Rogan, or they want to be on bigger podcasts.
Yeah.
But the reality is 10 million other people want to be on those podcasts.
Yeah.
So, and also it has to be the right fit, because, some podcasts are very topic specific. And they don't cover, maybe entrepreneurship or business. Maybe they're, targeting, current affairs, or they're targeting investment, or, whatever. But I think the reason for me starting my podcast was that I think the thing that I found frustrating was that, you see the same celebrities interviewing the same people, and everybody's interviewing each other, and it's all the same, and everybody's talking about their success. And I think that we have to be careful too, because there are so many great people like yourself and many other people that I've interviewed. I mean, I've probably interviewed close to over 300 people on my podcast. And at the end of the day, all of these people, I mean, some of them I know they are phenomenal in their own industry. They don't necessarily do PR, but they have an incredible story. And I think for me, what was the inspiration for starting my own podcast, actually, I guess it was just at the beginning of 2019. So I guess it was just before this whole, pandemic and whatever happened. But I really kind of felt that I'd met and come across some amazing individuals who've done amazing things, whether they're part of companies or whether they have their own businesses, and they really have a story to tell. And so I was never about, oh, I'm honing in on one specific category, or I just wanted to get these people's stories out and be able to share. So I think also, like I said to you before, is that some people are like, oh, we want to be on podcasts where there's like 100,000 subscribers, or there's 1 million subscribers. But I always say to people starting out, don't sneeze at the smaller podcasts, or fob off the smaller podcasts, because I've had clients who've gone on to smaller podcasts who've actually generated business, who've generated business on their on through these smaller podcasts. So it's always beneficial. I just don't think people need to think that something is beneath them, and that they have to go for something that's got like 10 million subscribers or whatever, because sometimes the quality of the base of those listeners for a smaller podcast can be very powerful. So, I think a cross section of all of those mediums in media are very important, and targeting different publications, because then, like I said, people can see different aspects. So something might be more philanthropic, or something might be more tech or business or entrepreneur based. So I think it's just nice for people to be able to see the different angles and backgrounds and things of the individual, characteristics of a person through multiple media, but obviously traditional media formats, including podcasts, which is more modern.
Yeah. So it's really a little bit like baking a cake, isn't it? It's an individual recipe for each person in terms of what used to be called the marketing mix. I haven't heard that word very much for quite a long time, but it's basically you're saying it's just a strategic mix to reflect.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got a question that's come through from one of our viewers tonight, Richard, and he says, define a bad person. So we're really talking about a values match. I think so. He was referring to our previous topic, which was really people buy from people, and people want to buy from people who are like them in terms of their values. And good and bad is in the eye of the beholder, let's just say, because you might be somebody who has a particularly strong view on something, let's just say climate change. That might be something that really matters to you a lot. And you want to, if you have the choice between investing in a company that is led by somebody who is very passionate about climate change, and maybe they donate a proportion of their profits to climate change charities or something like that, or initiatives, whatever, then you're probably going to favor that company over a company that doesn't, right? It's just as simple as that. So who's the bad guy and the good guy? It's a story. It's still a story, isn't it, Kerrin?
Yeah. I think that it also, yeah, it's a tricky one to navigate sometimes because, you know, I think we're obviously in this culture of cancel culture and political divide. And so, you know, sometimes you have to look at a person like let's just say it's a high profile person, and you know there's been some negative media around them, or there's been something negative. I think everybody's got their own moral compass, and sometimes even, you know, if somebody say, and it doesn't matter about the money, at the end of the day it's like, do you choose to be in alignment with this person, and are you willing to accept the consequences if there's backlash on that which can affect your business. And also, like, speaking of a bad, maybe, or I don't necessarily want to say, well, I guess it was bad. So for example, if you look at the head of Theranos,
Elizabeth
who,
Holmes.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know, look, all of us at some level, you know, fell into being a supporter of hers and thought she was amazing, and she was on the cover of these publications, and then obviously everything just fell apart, right? So again, it's a difficult one. And it's you know, even those publications were duped, so to speak, um, by you know how they were misled by that individual. So for me, obviously, you know, it's an individual case by case scenario. But if a person uh, doesn't necessarily align, or there's been some bad PR or bad media around this person or whatever, you know, personally, I would step away from that, just because also it can have a negative impact to my business. It doesn't mean I judge them or I don't wish them well, but you know, sometimes you have to make a decision over money
Yeah,
because it can have other ramifications. So I don't know if
yeah.
that answers the question, but
Yeah, and I think it's a very interesting, it's a very, very interesting topic, this whole thing of cancel culture, because I followed the Theranos story and Elizabeth Holmes and so on, and it
yeah,
really was a big case of a huge lie, in fact, a huge fat
yeah,
lie.
yeah,
And investors were taken in, and I mean, the whole story is fascinating. And of course, Elizabeth Holmes, she really defrauded a lot of investors and duped
mm,
a lot of people, really, that actually
mm.
this product was real when in fact it just wasn't.
No,
So for anybody who doesn't know
very
about this,
flawed.
yeah, supposed to be the pinprick test for every single element under the sun.
Mm,
And in fact, well, I mean, look, it just wasn't. So, but I think the interesting thing about cancel culture is that it's heading towards a situation where it is trialed by social media, which I think is
mm,
quite dangerous, isn't it? And there's been number of cases recently of some quite high profile people that have been publicly deplatformed, let's just say, without mentioning any names.
mm,
And I just wondered where you stood on that, because most of these people, they haven't had any form of a trial. Some people might have stepped forward and said, this person did this to me and behaved in this way, and it was really terrible. And then all of a sudden, their YouTube channel's gone, and
yeah,
they don't have a voice anymore. And
mm,
really, what it is just some people saying, yeah, that person did that to me as well. So then there's a kind of groundswell of people, I suppose, making a similar allegation. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, now the public has decided, or the powers that be in terms of the media have decided, that you are now no longer worthy of
mm,
airtime or attention or eyeballs or any of that value that we're talking about tonight. And I just wonder what you thought about that. Is it fair or is it not?
Well, I personally, I don't think that it is fair, because I think that we've come to a place where there's just so much division, so much distraction, so much hate, and a lot of this is instigated by a much deeper issue. I mean, I don't want to be labeled conspiracy or whatever, and honestly, I don't care, because I see it for what it is, and I think that at the end of the day, it's very sad that we've come to this place. Like, it's one thing to say to people, you have an opinion and you don't like what someone says. And we used to be able to have conversations around dining room tables or debates, on television or whatever. And now it's like, if you on one side and you disagree with the other side, we need to
Yeah.
cancel you. I think it's absolute rubbish. I think that we've just gotten to a place that is just gone like over the waterfall and beyond anything. It's ridiculous. And it's the same thing, like Elon says, whether you like Elon Musk or you don't like him is irrelevant. The point is that he's like, if you have an opinion on something, you have an opinion. You may not agree with that opinion, but you have to allow people to, if you want to call it democracy and you want to call it this, but at this stage, I feel like, we're heading to, tyrannical control by social media companies, which are dominated by political parties because of the money that they spend with these companies. And it
Yeah.
just, I mean, it's so deep rooted. I mean, I don't want to get into all the semantics, but I just feel like it's unfair to not be able to say, let's sit down and have a debate, and then walk away at the end of the day and agree to disagree, or find a common ground to have some resolution, as opposed to just canceling people. I think it's absurd. Unless
Yeah,
it's actually
absolutely.
physically threatening someone, or it's like dangerous, or it's something along those lines, then fine. But I just think otherwise, no.
Yeah, because one of the greatest privileges known to mankind is the opportunity to disagree and to have differing ideas and to be able to argue them out and to see another person's point of view, or to maybe put it up for scrutiny and say, I really don't agree with that. It's all part of the fun of life, isn't it? It's what
Mm-hmm.
it's what brings us entertainment in itself, is having a healthy, robust debate. And
Yeah.
so I agree that it's going a little bit too far, let's just say, and that's an understatement in terms of
Yeah.
obviously, because I'm a media person as well, so I can really, really see what's going on.
Mm.
And it's very, very clear that there has been a very strong shift towards defending certain ideologies, beliefs, protecting the interests of certain groups of people, whatever. And it's a shame, because people who are perhaps younger, less educated, more naive, they just believe that it's the truth. And it's a shame,
Mm.
because we should be in a culture where people are allowed to express their views and ideas and being able to enjoy doing so, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And then
Yeah.
stop creating division, because, but also I feel like a part of this journey is the people that fought for our freedoms. I think we're in that place where we have to fight for the next generation's freedoms, or
Yeah.
otherwise we're in real trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kerrin, if you're advising some of your clients and they say, I feel really strongly about this issue, and this is part of who I am. This is something that I really believe in. And you might think, do you know what? That might not go down that well if you go out there and you say that. How would you react to them? Would you say to them, if I were you, I'd keep that under wraps? Or would you say, you know what, just don't be vanilla, go out there and just stand for what you think is right? just be yourself? Which end of the spectrum is right, or is it somewhere in the middle?
I mean, I would say it would be somewhere in the middle. I mean, again, it depends completely on what they're advocating for or wanting to stand for.
Yeah,
And obviously there are nuanced ways to approach things. So, for example, maybe a client will be interviewed like on, like I said, Fox Business side, not the political side, and maybe that journalist will throw out something. So also what we do prior to the interview is say, like, if they throw out a question that's, kind of, I would say maybe slightly manipulative to turn it into a negative, like how can we turn that around if they come at you at a specific angle on something. So there are ways to do it, but again, it would be a case by case scenario and situation um, regarding regarding the individual itself. So there, I guess, is a middle of the road. I mean, it's so hard because I think we all have very strong views and opinions on things, and then sometimes it's like, if you're standing fighting for freedom and real democracy and the real definition of those things, um, it's it can be challenging, but it's also at the same time, if you say you stand for something, provided it's non-violent or that it doesn't harm another human, or it's not disrespectful in any way. um, I've had my own experiences just of sexual harassment, right? So it's like, well, when you've gone through that, it's like, well, how much do you speak out? How much do you say? There's all these kind of limited feelings, or what I should say. But now it's like, when you've gone through that maybe multiple times, it's like, well, maybe you should be standing up and speaking against that and trying to prevent those things from happening. So I always say to people, if you really believe in something, then you need to stand for it. But when it comes to media, obviously there's a fine line, because I know some people are like worried if they stand up and they say something that people are no longer going to jump ship, or I mean, no longer going to be there and jump ship in terms of business. But then I look at someone like Elon, who's like, he doesn't care whether his advertisers jump off or don't, because he's speaking on a subject, or he's not concerned whether his advertisers, whoever that is going to jump ship. So I guess it depends, but then Elon is Elon, right? Like, he's at that level where he doesn't really have to necessarily care what other people think. So I think it's just difficult. And it also depends where people are in their careers and where people are in their positions. But I say,
yeah.
if there's something you really need to stand for, then you should stand for it, provided you don't hurt other people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that polarizing is incredibly useful in any case. I always like to think that when I look at my clients, I think, do you know what? I love all my clients. I haven't got a single client that I don't really look forward to talking to, because I think that I mean, generally I don't try not to offend, but I know that not everybody is going to be for me. Absolutely not. There will be some people who
Yeah.
they're drawn towards me and they think, you know what, I really like Jane and one day I'd like to work with her. And there'll be other people that
Yes.
think, not in a million years, no way. And I'm really happy with that, because I know that they are just not my people.
Yeah.
And I think about some of the most polarizing people on on TV, and they are some of my favorite people. I really like those very confrontational people who they just are absolutely 100% themselves. And I think because they have the courage to be that way, they inspire others. But as you said, there's a it can go either way. It can either work in your favor or work against you, for sure. So yeah,
Exactly.
what an interesting conversation we've had today, Kerrin. It really has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So tell me, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or find out more about what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn, or they can email me at Kerrin at talentfinders.com. Or I'm on social media. So my Instagram is at Black Kerrin. Don't know why Instagram did that, but used my surname first, and then also Facebook as well. So can reach me on any one of those platforms.
Amazing. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us. It really has been fun. As I said, I've been really enjoyed our discussion tonight, and I'm going to be coming onto your podcast as well soon, aren't I? So I'm looking forward to that as well. Thank you so much, Kerrin, and have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jane. Ciao. Bye-bye.